Good evening, everyone. The time is 5:30. We're going to call the April 28th, 2022 special public meeting to order. Would you please rise for the pledge to the flag? Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Moving on to item 3 on the agenda is the purpose of the special public meeting. I'll turn that over to our planning director, Matt Waldinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening. I'll try and speak into the mic so everyone can hear me. I'd like to go through first a presentation just over going over how we got to this point, some of the changes that were made in response to some of the comments received, some examples of what we hope to achieve with the ordinance, and then I will turn it back over to the board. First of all, as you can see on the slides here, modernizing the zoning ordinance was something that came out of Embrace Millcreek. It was one of the main recommendations of the plan. This has been a multi-year process. We started work on this in 2019. And we used the goals of Embrace Millcreek as the guide for what residents told us they wanted the township to look like in the future. So under Embrace Millcreek, there were 5 focus areas, which were shown here. They are create a distinctive and high-quality gateway district to Presque Isle, strengthen neighborhood investment, position commercial corridors for adaptation and redevelopment, support business development, and promote strong and sustainable stewardship of township infrastructure. To give a little history of the public engagement that we went through in preparation of the plan, we did advertise things on the township's website, on our Facebook page, and through the In Millcreek magazine. And we also sent out press releases for every pertinent meeting. We began with a public survey on the zoning code, which was available on the township website from January 15th to January 21st, 2020. We had an informational session, which was an initial public kickoff meeting. We held that on March 12th, 2020. And at that, we presented the draft zoning map and a draft use table. We then further held 4 open houses in 2021, August 23rd and August 26th here at the Township Building, August 31st at the Bell Valley Fire Hall, and September 2nd at Zook Park. Further, we had public meetings in front of the Planning Commission. Those Planning Commission agendas were posted on the Township website and outside the Assembly Room. Just to note that the Planning Commission is made up of 7 citizens who review and make recommendations to the Board of Supervisors. And they held public hearings on the zoning ordinance on November 9th, 2021, March 1st, that should be March 1st, 2022, and April 5th, 2022. Additionally, there were public meetings in front of the Board of Supervisors. They were legally advertised, and the agendas were also posted on the Township website and outside the Assembly Room. Those were held on October 6, 2021, where the board authorized submission of the then pending zoning ordinance to the Planning Commission and Erie County Planning for their review and comment. On December 6th of 2021, we held a special meeting to solicit additional comments after the board decided to halt the adoption process in November to seek additional input. On February 22nd, 2022, the board again authorized submission of the plan that we are considering today to the Planning Commission and Erie County Planning to begin the review process. And of course, today, April 28th, today's special meeting. The Board of Supervisor meetings were all advertised pursuant to all required public notice. Additionally, at the Board of Supervisors meetings throughout the year, new or amended ordinances that are up for consideration are announced at those meetings. The proposed change to the zoning ordinance was announced at the following meetings: October 26th, November 9th, November 23rd, and December 14th, 2021. And January 3rd, February 2nd, March 8th, March 22nd, April 5th, and April 19th of 2022. To go in a little further depth about our means of communication with the public, did publish a couple articles, as I mentioned, in Millcreek magazine that has a circulation of over 25,000 copies. It is sent out to every residence and business in the 16414, 16504, 05, 06, 08, and 09, 16510, and 16565 zip codes. There were 2 articles published. There was one in the spring of 2020 edition, which came out in February of that year, which was an introduction to the process and an invitation to the March 12th, 2020 meeting. There was another article, a 2-page, in the fall 2021 issue that came out in August, gave the current status of the process and an invitation and information on the 4 open houses that I mentioned. Additionally, on Facebook, we used the Embrace Millcreek Facebook page, which was then copied and reposted to the Millcreek Emergency Management page. We had posts on August 18th, 2021. There were 4 posts, invitation posts to each of the open houses. October 28th, 2021, again February 22nd, 2022, and April 14th, 2022 to update people on the process in the public meetings. As far as media coverage, there were several articles in the Erie Times News going back as far as August 13th, 2019. I have the headlines of each of the articles there. For instance, the 2019 article was Consultant to Revamp Millcreek Zoning Development Regs. There were articles about the survey in January of 2020, articles about us seeking comments in March of 2020. I'm not going to read all of them. You can see them here all through the process. Additionally, there was news coverage on the television stations, several by WJET-TV Your Erie, and additionally one from WICU SEE Erie News Now about the open houses for the zoning code. So right now I'd like to talk through a summary of the changes that we've made to the ordinance since the fall in response to comments that we've received throughout the process. Beginning with the definitions, that's the first section of the ordinance, so I'll start there. We made modifications involving in agricultural uses and activities in order to respond to concerns that had been raised. There were questions on how to better address the keeping of traditional farm animals, as well as smaller animals such as chickens. Agricultural activities are still viable in areas of the township zoned conservation residential, and we felt the added clarity would be beneficial. Some of these changes include those to the definition of agricultural activities and agritourism. We incorporated backyard poultry into a new section. We added the definition of commercial livestock and poultry operation. We added a definition of farm, a definition of livestock. We added definitions regarding the non-commercial keeping of chickens, ducks, and livestock, and added those to the CR district. We added a definition of poultry. We added a definition of riding stable and added its use to the CR district. We added new agricultural activity section to supplemental regulations, and we added riding stable section to the supplemental regulations. Excuse me. We modified the definition of continuing care facility to clearly include both assisted and independent living, and we modified personal support services to clearly include recreation facilities. We modified convenience store definitions to be more descriptive and also to include reference to EV charging stations, so it's clear that they can be included in a convenience store project. We added definitions for electric vehicle and electric vehicle charging station. The definition for electric vehicle charging station has been decoupled from a parking space so that those stations can be placed as desired and will not count toward parking minimums or maximums. We clarified that office business park was a non-retail use, and we added a definition for the Presque Isle corridor. Moving beyond the district or the definitions, we move on to district regulations. This is the section with the most impactful change, and that change was the merging of the mixed-use 2 and the mixed-use 3 zoning districts into a new combined mixed-use 2 district. This change combined all of the uses of the previous 2. We also made the following other changes to the zoning districts. Obviously, first with the combination of the 2 mixed-use districts, MU3 has been eliminated as a district. In C2, we added shopping center neighborhood to make it clear that any shopping center is permitted there regardless of footprint. In the C3, we added manufacturing home sales. In the MU1, we added medical marijuana dispensary and multi-establishment center. In the MU2, we added retail as a use. We added medical marijuana dispensary. We also added office business park and retail business establishment. In the Presque Isle Gateway District, we eliminated animal daycare and we added medical marijuana dispensary. The previously mentioned Presque Isle corridor consists of properties along West 8th Street from Summerheim to Peninsula Drive and along Peninsula Drive from West 6th south for 300 feet beyond West 8th Street. We changed the Build 2 line to a minimum setback we changed Build 2 line to a minimum setback throughout the Presque Isle district, except for properties within the Presque Isle corridor. There is a Build 2 line of 10 feet in that corridor now, which could be modified to 20-foot Build 2 line if the additional area is dedicated for public use easement. We fixed an issue where language was not changed regarding the 10-foot Build 2 line and applied it to the rest of the district. That has now been corrected and it applies only to the Presque Isle corridor. Moving on to light industrial, we added manufacturing home sales there and into the heavy industrial district as well. In supplemental regulations, the following changes were made. We made modification to exterior lighting regulations in response to comments received. We made changes to the convenience store window placement and design to be consistent with the PA Flammable Liquids Act. Under limited lodging, we have a time limit now for long-term lodging, or for limited lodging, and we added a maximum limit of 2 persons per bedroom and a smoke alarm requirement. Under vehicle fuel station, we modified the setback to simply be 50 feet from the right-of-way and property line to the fuel dispensers, and again, we explicitly allowed EV charging stations. We modified outdoor advertising sign section to clarify language, especially concerning billboards that contain electronic message centers. We revised parking for the targeted corridors to remove the limits to parking in front of the structure and moved to an incentive system which would try to encourage more parking being placed behind buildings. Moving on to changes to the map. You can see here, hopefully. There we go. The overall map, you can see that we did incorporate MU2 and MU3 into one combined MU2 corridor commercial district. On the west side of the township, this shows a concentration of multifamily parcels that were previously in a mixed-use district and have now been moved to an R3 low-density residential district. This is an area of Zimmerly Road near Old Zook Road that was previously in a mixed-use district but has been changed to R1 single-family residential. There's this area near the intersection of Edinburgh and Interchange Roads that has been changed from mixed use to C2 regional commercial. And this is a close-up of the Presque Isle Gateway District so you can more easily identify the Presque Isle corridor, which is the green outline shown near the lower middle of the slide. You will also notice 2 map changes were made. Scott Park, Tracy School, and the residences that front West 6th Street were removed from the PI Gateway and placed in the R1 single-family residential district. And at the bottom of the map, you will note that some properties that front Peninsula Drive that were previously in the PI Gateway district are now in the MU2 district. To further emphasize the changes in the Presque Isle corridor, as I mentioned, there is a Build 2 line that is 10 feet from the right-of-way. That line can be extended to as far as a 20-foot Build 2 line if extra space is dedicated for public use, things such as outdoor dining, seating, landscaping, etc. I want to make clear that this distance is measured from the right-of-way, not from the edge of the pavement. A typical cross-section along West 8th Street would have the edge of the road, 6 feet of green space, a 5-foot sidewalk, then the right-of-way line, and then the 10-foot Build 2 line is measured from there. Buildings would be approximately 21 feet from the edge of the road and up to 31 feet with the optional configuration if they so choose. Parking is prohibited between the building and the right-of-way, but parking to the side or rear of the buildings is permitted. No, this is a little dense, but it's some reasons why we are seeking to make this change. If you replace the street frontage with buildings rather than off-street parking, it contributes to the following. It improves the interface between the public and private realm by creating a street frontage that focuses on people. It has balance. It accommodates all modes of travel, including walking, biking, and driving. It's false that people won't go into a business because they can't see a parking lot out front. They are usually fairly smart. They will find parking in the side yard or the rear yard. It's important, but it does not need to be front and center directly on the road. It reduces the conflict between pedestrians and cars by providing direct connections between building entrances and public sidewalks without pedestrians needing to cross parking lots. The space between the building and the street can be used for outdoor seating for restaurants, landscaping, seating areas. These activities are more conducive to attracting people, which is, of course, good for business. The improved safety for pedestrians far outweighs the convenience of parking in front of the building. Additionally, it supports mixed-use development, and it is good for business. To be successful, a mixed-use development has to be walkable. One of the fundamental objectives of mixed use is to allow for and encourage people to park once and walk to multiple businesses. Buildings closer to the street increase the visibility for building tenants, especially retail stores. It helps to create enclosure, which is proven to slow traffic. Buildings closer to the street, along with street trees, help to make the street feel narrow, which slows vehicular speed. And it is consistent with Embrace Millcreek. There was a consensus around a vision for West 8th Street that emphasizes walkability. Just adding a sidewalk is not what makes a place walkable. It needs to be inviting, enjoyable, and safe for all users. And front yard parking is in direct conflict with walkability. Next, I'd just like to show you a few examples, some that our consultant provided, some that we discovered on our own, of areas that have been developed under this concept. This slide shows the town of Greece, New York. There was a huge parking lot. You can see a Wegmans far in the back. The town amended their zoning code to require new buildings up near the front. It led to infill development. You see that there's a Dairy Queen and a AT&T store built in front. Although they aren't built quite as close to the road as we propose, they do have their parking in the side and in the back and are accessible to the sidewalk. Here's another view. This is also in Greece, New York. This is an infill development of a brand new Taco Bell built right on the corner, right on the edge of the sidewalk with parking in the rear. You can see that it's adjacent to an existing Pizza Hut that was previously there. This is a redeveloped site with the building moved out front. Next, moving on to Rochester, New York. This is Mount Hope Avenue. This was a picture from, I believe, the early 20-teens of what this stretch looked like. This is what it looks like today with a walkable street. Has Chipotle, has residences, first floor businesses with residences above. Another look at Mount Hope Avenue before, and then what it looks like now with street activation. You have tables on the street, you have users there. Everything is close and accessible. No parking. Next are some slides from Hershey, Pennsylvania. This is an area in Hershey, Chocolate Avenue, which is US Route 422. It's a heavily traveled road. This was a picture taken in July of 2017. This is the exact same area in August of 2020, just over 3 years later, showing that they built a development there close to the street, actually right on the edge of the sidewalk, closer than what we are proposing, with no parking in the front. Here's another view previously, 2017, and then 2020. Again, 2017. now in 2020. You see that it's not a monolithic building front. There are undulations. It moves in and out. There's also gaps so that people can get to parking, walk through to the rear. Another shot of a corner there, US 422. There's now a Starbucks on that corner and several restaurants, including a craft brewery. And again, from 2017, you can notice that there's a parking garage actually in the rear back there. That's the building with the sloped roof next to the roller coaster. And then what that area looks like today, shops and restaurants on the front. There's a walkway and access to the parking in the back. Seems that it's a very successful development. Additionally, we have heard about what a burden the build-to line would be and that it would prohibit development of certain properties. So we did take the liberty to reach out to the consultant that's doing our gateway plan, Matt Ingalls, and we asked him just to provide an image of what a lot actually on West A Street could look like if it was redeveloped under the proposed ordinance. And this is the result. You can see that it allows for outdoor dining space in the front. It has visibility for the businesses. It's accessible to pedestrians, as well as it having room on the second floor for tenants, whether they're residential or commercial. The new regulations do require a different way of thinking, but as the previous dozen or more slides I shared show, it can be done, it has been done, and it is thriving. So moving on to the zoning ordinance that's in front of you. At their regular meeting of Tuesday, April 5th, 2022, by a 4-3 vote, the Millcreek Township Planning Commission recommended adoption of the ordinance. They did include in their motion a recommendation that the Board of Supervisors eliminate the Presque Isle corridor before they adopt it. We also received a letter from the Erie County Department of Planning and Community Development. That came on March 24th, 2022. The letter states in part, the proposed zoning ordinance appears to be consistent with the Millcreek Township Comprehensive Plan as it concentrates planning efforts around the Presque Isle corridor, promotes a variety of affordable housing, and optimizes commercial corridor development. It also encourages reuse of industrial and commercial properties in designated corridors and promotes responsible management of community infrastructure, parks, and recreation and natural resources. It is the recommendation of the Planning and Development Department that the board adopt the zoning ordinance and map as presented without making any changes. I believe it is an important step in creating a better community for all, residents and visitors alike. While I understand that some are opposed to certain facets of the ordinance because of the way it affects them, I think it is important to remember that this is being done for the entire community and not for any particular interests. It's also important to remember that anyone affected has the right to seek relief from the zoning hearing board if they so choose. Those that will have non-conforming uses after adoption will be permitted to continue them with protection under the ordinance. We've also included the ability to expand nonconformities. We've relaxed that so that an expansion of up to 25% can occur by right without having to go to the zoning hearing board. Additionally, the township is not done. We're not going to just stop everything once we've passed this ordinance. We've heard concerns. We will continue to work to address them. One instance in particular regarding short-term rentals, we are currently researching a short-term rental ordinance to create regulations around the types of incidents that can occur at these establishments, but those regulations go beyond things that can be corrected or imposed with zoning. I would ask you, the board, not to give in to those who would talk down Millcreek in the city and the region as being something less than. Some will say that we are not worthy of having nice things, good businesses, or attractive spaces. They will say we should be happy with what we have and not change any rules. I would propose to you that those rules led to what we have now, and the results are less than stellar, frankly. While there are some shining examples of beautiful, well-managed properties such as the Colony Plaza, the West Erie Plaza, Niagara Therapy Building, the Montessori School, those are just a few. There is also a large swath of disinvestment as well. Properties are underutilized or abandoned. Vacant restaurants have been left to rot. Those could have been developed under the old ordinance, but were not. In closing, I'd just like to thank everybody that worked on this ordinance. Mackin Engineering was our consultant, the Planning Commission, all the employees of the township and the Board of Supervisors. I would like to especially recognize Matthew Puz, Julie Maggio, and Matt Puda from the Planning and Development team, as well as the hard work of attorneys Mark Shaw and Lydia Caparosa. Could not have been here without their help. It was a lot of work, but it was enjoyable because it was done with these great colleagues. I'd also like to thank and acknowledge all of the public who came out to speak and give their input and to suggest changes. I feel like this is a better ordinance for that. As I mentioned, it is the recommendation of the Planning and Development Department, as well as myself personally, that the Board of Supervisors adopt this ordinance.
Okay, thank you, Matt. At this time, we will move on to the public hearing portion of this public meeting. I'd ask that if you are going to address the board, if you have already signed in the back, you don't need to sign in up here at the podium. But if you didn't sign in, please sign in here at the podium. The hearing is now open. Would somebody who would like to address the board?
Mr. Chairman, if I could initially, I would suggest and recommend that the presentation that Mr. Waldinger just made be incorporated as a part of the hearing record.
Okay.
That would include his slide presentation.
Okay. Require board action, Mr. Shaw? Okay.
Yes.
All right.
I'll make a I'm sorry. I'd like to make a motion to enter Mr. Waldinger's information and PowerPoint into the record.
I will second that, Mrs. Clear.
Okay. Mr. Block?
I vote yes.
Mrs. Clear?
Yes.
And I vote yes. Okay.
Good evening, everyone. Greg Baldwin, Baldwin Brothers. I'm sorry to interrupt the motion. My apologies. I was sort of half listening. So obviously, first of all, thank you for having this special meeting. Thank you, of course, again, for listening to all the input that many in this room have provided over the last 4 months or 5 months, so we appreciate that. I was at the Planning Commission meeting, and there was a lot of discussion, particularly about the Prescott District and the corridor itself. So I think at this point, being as we're so far along in the process, I'd like to focus my comments primarily on those issues surrounding the district and corridor, really more towards the corridor, because it is really a focused and tremendous modification of the regulations in the zoning ordinance that have an effect on very small group of people. It's really 25 property owners, many of whom I see are actually here tonight, because frankly, I think this was such a huge change. A lot of them didn't really realize it because it is a 200-plus page ordinance, and many people don't really focus on some of these changes to really realize how significant the changes were. So there's sort of a question in my mind as to the adequacy of the notice with such a dramatic change to some of the people in the room. So I'm glad to see that there are a lot of people here today. So I wanted to give you a letter that I'd like to record as one more. Sorry, turn the shot. So we would like to suggest that the supervisors table the final enactment of the ordinance to really consider the effect on the 25 property owners in the corridor and some of the property owners, obviously, in the Prescott District with respect to the parking regulations that affect the entire district and not just the corridor. We think you should table the discussion, particularly in light of the fact that the funding for the potential $6 million Prescott corridor wasn't received and only a portion of it was. That throws a wrinkle in sort of the redevelopment or revitalization of the area. Not to mention the whole plan of the Prescott District really isn't finalized at this point. There's public input coming in on that. And a lot of, as I said, a lot of these property owners really didn't get very good notice about how the build to line would affect their ownership of the property, what they can do with the property, and potential for the reduction in property value as it relates to their ownership. So I think there are some significant issues there that really should be addressed and looked at. And there's an overall issue generally. And Matt, the presentation was very good, and the pictures were lovely of some of these communities that did things like this. But I'm a developer, there's other developers in the room, there's other real estate agents in the room, and yes, we want to be the best we can be, but we also have to understand where we are and what we're talking about, because areas like Greece, New York, Hershey, and some of the other areas that were shown in the presentation, their demographics are significantly higher than Erie. There are more people, they have more money, there's more traffic counts, there's demand to be in the area. For example, Greece, New York, it's almost impossible to penetrate the market. So a municipality came in and changed the zoning. People were going to build there no matter what, period. In this case, we have an area that we really want to see revitalized. All of us, everyone in the room wants to see the streets beautified. They want to see new buildings built. They want to see more people come to the area. But the challenge is, right now, you don't have the mass of people who really want to come to the area or who come to the area, and you have to create something to bring them there. Right now, the mass of people go shop and eat up by the Millcreek Mall, maybe on 12th Street, 12th and Pittsburgh, or Upper Peachtree. This is where the population goes. It's this more centralized area of the county. So this West 8th Street area, which all of these people own property there, they enjoy it, they have businesses there, and many flourishing businesses, I might add. They don't really want to be forced to modify their buildings or build buildings at a 10-foot setback if they want to renovate or redevelop their sites. And they very well know that in order to continue to be successful in the area, you need more people. You need more people there. We need amenities in the area. And the township, as part of the Prescott District Plan, should be creating amenities, whether it's green spaces, parking lots, all sorts of things, so that people have a reason to come. And Chip has a great plaza. Chip needs more parking. There's absolutely no question about it. The municipality should be focusing more on making changes, real changes in the district, rather than a black letter regulation on build to and parking requirements and all of these things that inevitably, in the end, based upon the current condition of the area, with all these people who own property there, they simply will not redevelop their properties. And I've said this to all of you, we've had this discussion, but I want to repeat it again because I think it's really important. If the board enacts this ordinance with these provisions related to Prescott District and the corridor right now, the legacy that we're creating in Millcreek Township is not of revitalization. That's not what we're going to see. We're going to see every one of these people not do anything with their building at all. Joe Roots, I love the picture, by the way. That was our property, Joe Roots, the one we used as an example to show the building being built on the street. But the reality is we can't afford to do that. It's economically unfeasible. And that is pie in the sky from a consultant. It's great down in Hershey where people are making $100,000 a year and there's 200,000 people in 10 miles. I looked at the demographics today in Hershey because a couple of you were down there and I assumed you probably saw some of the redevelopment in the area. Our demographics here are $60,000 a year and there's like 50,000 people in the same area, 60,000 people in the same area. Our demographics, we have to realize that. And it's not, I'm not saying we shouldn't or we can't or the norm is okay or status quo is okay. It's not. There's no question about it. We own a property in the area. We want to see the revitalization too, but it has to go in the right order. And I think we're improperly instituting these governmental regulations, the 10-foot setback, the parking regulations, instead of naturally seeing the developers want to come in. Down in Hershey, a developer bought Hershey Town Center, that property, and developed it. There was a reason for them to be there. There were people coming. There's Hershey Park. There's all sorts of tourism in the area, significantly more than what we have here. And a developer bought it. They developed it in conjunction, in certain cases, with parking garage and some other traffic improvements, et cetera, with the municipality. So it's a different scenario altogether. So what I'm suggesting is take the recommendation of the Planning Commission, eliminate the corridor as it exists, eliminate the build to, eliminate the parking. Let's refocus the efforts on actually revitalizing the area. Start with the streetscape, start with adding green space, and the township has the money to do it, whether it's public playgrounds or whatever the case may be, to bring the people. And then naturally, once the people come, then the developers or property owners are willing to redevelop their parcels. Right now, this is sort of an irrational approach. I know you've all worked really hard, but the world has changed since the comprehensive plan was in effect. We went through COVID. More businesses have gone bankrupt. They're not operating. They're not operating in brick and mortar. There are fewer potential users out there in the world who we can even bring down to 8th Street. We've had no interest in 8th Street whatsoever, and I am stunned. Stunned. I mean, nationally marketing it, regionally, locally, nobody wants to be in that area. And it's not because the buildings aren't pretty or the developments aren't pretty. It's because the people aren't there, the traffic counts aren't there, and the money isn't there. So it's an unfortunate scenario, yes. Can we do something about it? For sure. Not this way. So I don't want to take up any more time, but we would recommend tabling the decision, going back to the drawing board a little bit, taking these particular, taking the corridor out of the ordinance, out of the map, off the map, and eliminating the parking. We understand there's an administrative issue with that, okay, we have to make the modification, re-advertise, have another meeting. Attorney Shaw's laughing because he knows I know. It's a little bit of an administrative pain. I get it. But if we make this decision to enact the ordinance as is, we could be making a decision that will last 50 years, and it'll be 50 years of no revitalization or redevelopment in the area. Thank you.
It looks like, before when we had C1 and C2, it was the C2 uses included C1 uses. And when I go through the list of what's available in C1 and what's available in C2, I think it might be appropriate to do that again. C1 seems to be the strip along P Street, and then a little area on the southwest corner of Pittsburgh Avenue and 12th Street. The major intersections you have, like Peninsula Drive and 12th Street, Peninsula Drive and 26th Street, all seem to be MU2 or a little bit of C2 maybe. Well, C2 is up by the mall. You don't have any convenience stores permitted there. You have the, I guess, the small and neighborhood, but those are really obsolete. They're never going to happen. Anybody's going to come and develop it, they're going to do a large convenience store. I kind of went through a little bit of the existing convenience stores. 6 of them will be in a conditional use, 5 will be non-conforming, and 2 will be okay, and those are the small ones. I know that doesn't mean much, and everybody can say, well, it's operating as a convenience store, it's grandfathered, but say someone comes along and wants to buy Country Fair out. They're going to be looking at all these, and they're going to say, well, you're in a conditional use, you're in a non-conforming use right now, and we got to go through the process to make sure that we can continue to operate. If you want to tear that down, redevelop at some point, you might say, well, if they do it within a year, that's okay. But a lot of times you can't get it done within a year. You got to do engineering, you got to do maybe another stormwater management plan, you got to do traffic studies and everything else. You may not be able to get it built in the time that you need to get it started. So I think that, when you get into the C2, some of those, I think you need to look at putting in the convenience stores again in the C1, C2, and MU2 districts. Those are the biggest commercial areas that you have. And, you know, again, I think also there's some other uses that are in C1 that if you combine the two will be okay, because you have like car washes, daycare, convenient funeral home, hospitals, all those vehicle detail, those aren't available in C2, which is up by the mall, but it's available in C1. And I don't understand why that's the case. So I think if you combine those two and maybe include convenience stores into the MU2, I think it would be helpful to the community.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to address the board? Mr. Groh.
John Grove, 603 Montpelier Avenue here in Millcreek. And as many of you know, I was a former township official here, sitting in those chairs there too, guys. And prior to that, I had many years' experience working in building and zoning code administration and enforcement. There's so many things that were said by Mr. Baldwin and also Mr. Reel. They're both attorneys and developers too, property owners. I'll just give it to you from a blue-collar perspective. I'll keep it clean, of course, always. The point here is that this Peninsula, Presque Isle district, I'm not sure it makes a whole lot of sense. Okay, this 10-foot setback and so on and so forth. Let's look at the properties that are going to be affected. I'm just thinking here in a very quick list. Okay, we have the former Joe Roots, okay, for that to be redeveloped, and I've got to say that the drawing that was done by the developer, or not by the developer, but by the engineer, that's a bit much. I don't think you're ever going to see something like that. You're probably going to see something of a restaurant design down there, not that sort of three-story office building, if I was seeing that right. Is that right, Matt? It was three-story office building. I don't know if we'll see that. It would be nice, don't get me wrong. We would have to welcome that. That would be a great idea. We have to remind ourselves that we are not Florida. We're not South Carolina. We're not these other communities here too. We are Millcreek Township, and we have our own unique style, okay? Our form of government is a unique style. When you look at these other ones, there's a little different setup the way those are done. I'm very concerned, and please do not take this the wrong way, Matt. You and I are good friends here, okay? The appeal to the zoning hearing board, if somebody needs to have a modification done, go to the zoning hearing board. Why do we set that up for that? Granted, there will be cases where you have non-conforming uses, non-conforming setbacks, but that's what we're trying to avoid is going to the zoning hearing board. If you automatically know that an ordinance provision is setting up an appeal to the zoning board, why are we doing it, okay? But let's talk about this whole idea of the 10-foot setback. Let's look on 8th Street. How many properties with the potential for redevelopment? Let's look on the south side. Look at the Arby's, okay? That is probably not going to be reused in any type of use like that. I don't think. Of course, I'm not in real estate. I'm not a developer. I'm just a former zoning code official, okay, and a former elected official. I'm just looking at it from an average guy, okay? I don't think that's going to be reused as a restaurant. How much land is there to actually do something with under today's standards, okay? It might get tore down and put into an office or something like that, maybe a small restaurant. We don't have a whole lot of restaurants anymore here in Erie. Let's look at the other side of the street. We have the Clarion Hotel, which I'm not sure what the status of that is right now, and I do hope that reopens. It may be reopened now. I don't know, so I apologize if I have bad information on that. But then let's look to the east of that. You have the Schilling's Carpet Place, and I can't remember what that was at one time, but I think that may have been a restaurant too. And then you got Perkins. And you got the vacant lot there, that little corner lot there, Lowell Avenue in West 8th. That was the Marathon, Clark gas station, whatever it was that week, you know, finally tore down, okay? And then we have a really nice piece of Millcreek property there, and that's called the Colony Plaza. Well-owned, well-maintained. Chip, you do a great job over there, always filled. It's a great location there. I look at that, what is wrong with that, with a setback on it? Cars park in front, big deal, so what, okay? I just can't figure that one out, why this whole thing about the 10-foot and the walkability, yes, we need sidewalks. Millcreek is notorious for not having them. Yes, we're trying to correct that there. But as far as walkability, let's get sensible about this and get realistic about it. How many people are gonna actually walk along that sidewalk there? Keep that in mind, okay? We need to construct, we need to do that under ADA. We've had an agreement a long time now to make sure we comply with the requirements of a prior lawsuit, okay? So those are the things that I'm talking about right there. But always, I think you want, God bless you. Okay. Anyway, we want to keep, I'll just make this one final comment here. Zoning is always changing. There are new uses coming about. We heard Matt talk about the Airbnbs or the rentals, you know, that we're going to be addressing that in the ordinance, okay? We always have to keep that in mind. I think of when I first started in zoning and code administration, that cell towers were the big deal. They were the big issue. They're a non-issue right now, okay? We're looking now at this, you know, a residential use and how it's being used by the owner or lack of owner, you know, renting it out. So it's always changing. And we have to keep that in mind, that there's always going to be appeals to it. Whether it's done through the court system, you know, first of all, starting in the zoning hearing board, or, you know, through the board of supervisors, you know, under an amendment, you will, in other words, if you were to adopt this, it's not going to be the only time you will ever deal with this ordinance. You may deal with it within 6 months. It's just the way it is. I can tell you from when I worked in the construction trades, for those who don't know, I was an electrician working in the commercial construction. There were times on projects where you get the plans, and even before you start digging, there is already a change order on it. That can happen. And the same thing happens in zoning and planning too. So keep that in mind. I don't know what you may have been told by prior supervisors or newspaper editors thinking that once you adopt this, this is it. No, you're always going to have amendments to it and challenges to it. So be prepared. So however you vote, I'm going to ask you also, and I don't work for Baldwin Brothers, I don't work for Mr. Real, I don't work in the real estate. I'm retired. I do nothing except come to these meetings, okay? And tell you what you should do. Anyway, you know, I'm just telling you from an average citizen, a guy that's lived in Millcreek all my life. Do the right thing. Hold off on the vote tonight. Make the changes that you need to do, okay? Do away with that Presque Isle district. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Groh.
So my name is Michelle Mayodacheski. I'm 2631 West 8th. I'm the Niagara Therapy property. So I come from a unique perspective. I'm a therapist who happens to own commercial real estate. So I don't know any of the political stuff. I'll tell you that up front. My concern, and I come to you as somebody who pretty much meets the ordinance already. So I come from a different perspective because it doesn't really impact me as much on a immediate in my bubble. My concern is that if we haven't procured the funding for the rest of the streetscape, are we putting enforcement and rule that will restrict people before we tell them and show them how fabulous it is? Before you can dazzle somebody with the ice cream cone and the sprinkles and the, you know, the cherry on top, which we need the streetscape to do that, we're throwing regulation at them. Make them want to be there so bad that it doesn't matter what the regulation is, we'll fit the regulation, we'll make it work. My concern is that we haven't dazzled them and enticed them to come in before we give them the rule book that they have to follow to be there. So I come to you from a different perspective. I'm not necessarily horribly against it because I kind of already meet the rule. I come from I'm offering a premium therapy service in an area that not all the associated neighborhoods and buildings and spaces next to me are at the same caliber. And my clients want to see that. So that's my approach. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you for your comment. Anyone else wish to address the board? Okay. Mr. Shaw, item 5?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Item 5?
Yes. Before you is the proposed ordinance 2022-4. I would note that there was some minor changes from the ordinance that was published relating to things, typos, those types of things, clean up things that were done and caught as we went through the ordinance to make sure that, to minimize, as Mr. Groh indicated, having to come back and make future amendments with respect to those types of things. There was one other change, I believe, that we made with respect to limited lodging. Under the, I think, ordinance that had been published, the recommendation would be to modify the limited lodging language so that to combine the short and long-term into one category. As we looked at it, it didn't seem to make sense to have it as two categories. I think there's only really one difference between the two. So we joined them into one category, and then we also added, I believe, a minimum night requirement of 3 nights with a maximum of 30 nights, just to address some of the initial issues that may arise with respect to those types of short-term rentals, to dissuade the party concept that often creates significant issues in the neighborhoods that they are being rented at. So with those changes, I would recommend that the board proceed to a vote as it may see fit, whether it proceeds to decide to table this based on the comments received, or proceed to vote on the ordinance itself. Mr. Walding, were there any other additional changes that we had made other than the limited lodging?
Not that I recall, other than you enumerated.
Okay. And that's just really, frankly, a minor change of just adjusting some of the language with respect to that. None of the footprint where limited lodging would be allowed to occur would have changed.
Thank you, Mr. Shaw. Any comments or questions from the board?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I would like to say a few words here. I know I'm the, oh, yes. Can you not hear me?
Oh, I can hear. I just have a question here. I came to the meeting about my neighborhood zoning, which I consider embracing Millcreek. And I thought this was just about East Street and all that. Now you're bringing up about rentals and all that. Can I have a moment to speak about that? I didn't want to impose on your meeting.
Yes, that is right. This is about the entire ordinance that we are looking to pass. So yes, you can speak on any part of that ordinance. Come on up. Wait, Mr. Chairman has to give you permission.
Yes, come on, yeah.
Sorry,
Please proceed.
just ignore me.
Yeah, this is the ordinance involves the entire township, not just a certain portion of it.
My name is Christine Blackman, and I'm on Court Avenue, 3028. And I'm kind of talking, and they'll correct me if I'm wrong, but our whole family and half of Court Avenue are people who, they're the original homes. I'm 70 years old. I've lived there all my life. We have a lot of Blackmans on Court Avenue. But what's happening is, and I could be wrong, but we're getting all these rental houses on our street, and my neighbor alone has already had 2 armored trucks there with SWAT teams. And our neighborhood is very concerned about rentals. There are a lot of people whose homes they're renting out, like on the boulevard down there. And I guess I'm looking at, that's part of Millcreek. You may not have a new subdivision that is only zoned, and you know nobody's going to go rent from them. So what's going on in Millcreek that this is being allowed? And I guess my question, I should have looked before I came, but I've been busy. Is our neighborhood over by Pittsburgh Avenue zoned to be able to allow all these rentals and either people buying houses or people renting to people in their home? You know, I don't know anything about zoning.
If I may ask, are you talking about like somebody renting their home to somebody to live in, or are you talking about a short-term rental where it's just like for the weekend and then?
Oh, no, it's not short term. I'm talking
Okay.
about a lot of houses. There was one that should have been knocked down, and a person bought it not knowing what they were doing, so now that house is rented. I've got this girl next door to me that's just causing havoc, and that's a rental, and the guy doesn't want to throw her out because he has to redo the whole house. Just talked to him the other day. Sandy Ambrose, I mean, there's a 90-year-old woman living on the other side of this. She's been there since, it's a family home. Down on 29th Street in the Boulevard, there's a house with apartments above, and there's Bosnians that they rent to. There's down the street. I mean, they're all over the place. And is this allowed or not allowed, or maybe we need, my point is, what's our zoning? You know, just because we're the original Millcreek that we love, why, you know, is this good or bad zoning? And maybe we need to look at that, is what I'm saying. And you're talking up about B&Bs and what's been going on with B&Bs. These are rentals for a year that are causing havoc in our neighborhood. Harkins, he's moved back to Erie. I mean, it's just like everybody on Court Avenue, half of them are the original people or moved back and bought their old homes. And I don't think that we should be having these people buy these houses, rent them out to people who can't afford houses, and just destroying our neighborhood, and that's what's happening. Or, you know, unless you can prove that somebody's in an apartment, you're living upstairs. We have one down the street too, some college kids. So I guess I just would like to look into that part of zoning too. And like I said, maybe it is allowed and I should go and talk to them, but I don't think it should be allowed. You know, we should be like building a house on Asbury Road in a subdivision. If it's a house for families, that's what it should be. If it's apartments, that's what it should be. Okay? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Blackman.
Thank you.
Okay, Mrs. Clear.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank, first of all, I would like to thank everyone for being here this evening. Good government is only possible when residents, property owners, and stakeholders are invested in the process. And I do believe in good government. A few comments that I would like to make about today's proposed zoning ordinance. First, I would like to recognize the exemplary work that has been done by the Millcreek Planning Department. The document and map has taken years to create, and I commend the efforts of everyone involved. I'm only coming at this at the very tail end, and I appreciate all that has been done over the last few years. Secondly, I would like to thank the residents, the property owners, and the stakeholders for taking the time to meet with me to express their concerns and to give suggestions of what they would like to see the zoning ordinance look like. I would like to say that most of the recommendations given to me by many of the stakeholders, residents, and property owners have been addressed. One of the biggest changes was the allowing of more uses in many of the areas. We also had the 10-foot line with the now 20-foot line, and I believe that those were good compromises. And I think that the key word that I would like to take a moment to reflect on is compromise. The compromises that were made by the planning department based on their initial vision are much appreciated. Probably much to their dismay, they were able to compromise on what they initially had in mind to accommodate and hear the residents, the stakeholders, and the property owners. I think that only together can we create the kind of Millcreek that we want to see. Again, I come back to good government. It's the voices of all of them for the betterment of most. A wise person once told me that compromise usually means that no one leaves happy. It's not really the most positive thing to say, but I think that most of what we've done thus far reflects a vision of Millcreek that we want to see. I guess I want to end by saying that this ordinance is not perfect. I recognize that. I think the board recognizes it. The Planning Commission recognizes that. You may recognize that. We did not address all of the concerns that we have heard from you regarding many of the decisions, or regarding some of the allowances that you would like. But I would like to reiterate that this ordinance is not dead. This is a living, breathing document. This is something that we are going to be revisiting week after week, month after month, year after year. We are going to have to be able to change and transition and make this a flexible, breathable document for all of you and for us. So I would like to make sure that we do hear and continue to hear from all of you. I don't want this to be the end of the conversation. I'll give you my cell number. Text me anytime. I might give you Matt's. I'm kidding, I won't give you Matt's. But this cannot be the end of the conversation. I look forward to working with each and every one of you. And I appreciate everything that you have done to bring us this far. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Clear. Well said. Any other comments or questions from the board? Okay, is there a motion to approve?
I will make a motion to approve the ordinance 2022-4.
And is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, Mr. Buck,
I vote yes.
Mrs. Clear,
Yes.
and I vote yes. Okay, moving on to the next item, citizens to be heard. Are there any citizens to be heard? Okay. Hearing none. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, meeting's adjourned at 6:35. Thank you, everyone.